My name's Lesley Steinitz. I'm here at the History Faculty in Cambridge, and my research concerns the history of food. So I'm going to talk about meat, and specifically beef, from a historical perspective, which perhaps gives a view of why it's so difficult for some of us, me for example, to move away from eating meat. These beasts, well, I say beef comes from beasts that have been loved for millennia. You only have to think about sacred bulls, holy cows, golden calves to see how far back it goes. And we in Britain have been champions of eating beef. Certainly by the 18th and 19th centuries, we ate more beef per capita than just about anybody else in the older nations. And it was in the 18th century that beef really became a symbol of Britishness, and it remained so during the 19th century and beyond. So what drove the cultural importance of beef? It was thought of as being one of the reasons for Britain's economic and military power. Commentators said that it made men hot-blooded and aggressive, but also made us strong and brave, and compared us favourably to the men, the weak and puny men from the bean-eating nations. And this is all over sort of 19th century literature. You can have a really good laugh reading that stuff. But military commanders agreed. So you had armies traipsing across places, followed by herds of cattle for the soldiers to eat. It was that important. And it became a particular concern in the 18th century when the population doubled. And all the wars in Europe made the food supply a particular concern, because they didn't want to rely on people outside. And so breeding and lots of agricultural technologies started to become a big thing. So that's when there started to be a fashion amongst rich landowners and aristocrats for breeding absolutely ginormous cattle, which sort of often are in, if you look on websites, they're referred to as rectangular cattle. They were ridiculously big. They were no good for eating because they were so fatty. But this was sort of part of the symbolism which grasped people's ideas for two things. First of all, it fed into public debates about evolution and justification for the supposed superiority of the British and Europeans over different races that Britons were colonising. And secondly, it was a metaphor, again, for strength and power. And both of these fed into particularly 19th century anxieties that the British population was getting weaker mentally and physically, that they were degenerating, they were evolving backwards. And this was going to have dire consequences for the economy and for the ability to keep conquering the empire. And beef was the answer. Then in the 19th century, we had nutritional chemists who, amongst other things, one of the very important things that they taught the population was that protein was the most important food. Without it, you would die. Nothing else mattered as much as meat. Rather, nothing mattered as much as protein. And the best kind of protein, they said, came from meat. And even some of them even advocated, albeit somewhat jokingly, cannibalism, because that was the best kind of meat. And if you couldn't cannibalise, which of course they weren't suggesting seriously, I can see looks of horror, this was trying to get people's attention, then the next best thing was beef. So, you know, it's really rooted in science and culture at this point. Of course, the end of the 19th century saw developments in transport, steam shipping, trains and so on, and refrigeration techniques. And that meant it was possible to ship meat globally. And this is when vast cattle concerns started to be developed in South America. So the beginning of what we're seeing now in the Amazonian fires, That's when this started. Also in North America, Australia, South Africa were vast cattle concerns. And this also spurred consumerism, or consumer products, and specifically cheap products that were made from meat that people could afford and pay for. How many here have heard of Bovril? Yes! So Bovril was a late 19th century health food. It contained protein as well as meat, and it was fluid beef. As disgusting as that sounds, that was really attractive to people, and that's pretty much what it is. And of course, you can still buy it today. I don't know how many of you drink it. Bovril were amazing advertisers, and some of their adverts really show you some of the imagery of beef that were addressing people in this time. So here you've got the Times, you've got a whole page advert of spiel about Bovril with this great big powerful ox coming through the page. What could be more alluring than that? The message was that meat made muscle, and all of the masculine virtues that went with that. It also made you brave and patriotic. These are gym instructors from the army with their Bovril castle and their Bovril banners, you know. And this carried on, this kind of advertising and imagery carried on through World War I, which is where these adverts, well, the second advert comes from. The first one is this one here. Is one of their most famous adverts, started in 1896, was about the idea of sacrifice. The bull sacrificing himself for man, man sacrificing himself for the nation. And the other was an even more explicit explanation of that. So beef, muscles, masculinity, patriotism, everything that was good about being British. No wonder we can't shift and stop eating this stuff.